Welcome to Multimedia 127, Creating User-Centered Content. In this class, we will look at developing content. And by content, I mean a website, a web page, a form, a flyer, a logo, a multimedia application, any type of product or service. And we will look at it with respect to developing it based on the user, on who the user is, what their needs and goals are with respect to that product or service. We will also look at what is called creating a user experience, as a user experience is part of the user-centered process. So user experience, and the acronym is UX, essentially is a subject that studies the interactions a person has with a product, service, or organization based on that user and their lifestyle. Therefore, it is user-centered within the context of that product or service. This term was coined by Don Norman, who worked at Apple. As we all know, the Apple products, the tablets, the phone, have really changed our life and become part of our society because they provided a user experience that we found valuable and easy to use. Steve Jobs was very good at designing these products because he put the user at the foremost of the development cycle. So you might ask a question: what's it like to use a product or a service? And the answer is generally it's either hard or it's easy. And what we're actually referring to is the user experience. All right, does the product do what it should? Is there some kind of aesthetic or sensory appeal? So these are some of the things that we'll be looking at throughout this class. So sometimes the requirements of a successful user experience are actually built into the product itself. For example, a phone, where the buttons are located, etc. A form, the form elements, the buttons. The more complex a product or service is, the more difficult it can be to deliver a successful experience. So let's take a look at websites. A website is essentially a self-service product. There's no user manual telling us how to use it. Therefore, it should be obvious as to what to do and how to do things. This is what we mean by user-centered, as opposed to the user not knowing what to do. Making it easy for the user to use, making it obvious. The user experience can be broken down into 5 components. Number 1, the usefulness. Is the product useful with a clear purpose? Usability. Is it easy to use? Learnability, very important. Is the product simple to master quickly with minimal instructions? And will I remember how to do it the next time I come back, or the next time I pick up that product? Aesthetics are involved. There's always a visual component to a product, to its design, to make it appealing. And there's also an emotional component. What types of emotional feelings are invoked from using that product? All right, do they have an impact on the user? And will the user want to continue to use that product? The user experience is not the same as usability. The user experience has more to do with how the user feels. Usability is more concerned with the user friendliness of the interface. Granted, usability does play a major role in the experience, because if it's not user friendly, we're not going to have a good experience. Developing user-centered content extends to all aspects of the organization. So we have the client will be interacting with possibly a phone. Here again, we've all called and we get these press 1, press 2, press 3, etc. How user-friendly is that? Email, that where we can click links. Obviously the web, print materials, an in-store experience, and on our social networks. So we're looking at client user-centered content exists in different formats. User-centered design is actually methodology. It is an approach to design and development that considers the user's needs up front and throughout the design and development process. So that's what this course is focusing on. All right, a process by which we do this, by which we build something, keeping the user in mind from the very beginning and throughout the process. It's not about necessarily writing code. By employing the user-centered design methodology, time and money will be saved. All right, if we start using and evaluating with the users early in the process. We need to understand what it's like for them to use the product or service way before the final design or even the code begins to be written. And we'll be talking about how we do that in this course. Let's think about the web, because most people in this class are generally web developers. Back in 1987, Tim Berners-Lee developed the web as a system of hypertext links. We essentially were connecting documents, clicking on links. Primarily the information was static, read-only. However, that was high technology for that era. This was a new medium for publishing information. The web today consists of many different features and technologies, not only on the client or the browser side, but also on the server. We talk about the read-write web, Web 2.0, Web 3.0, where we have dynamic content from data-driven websites. We have content that responds to who we are, to where we are, to our previous preferences. Very different from the web that we used 20 years ago. So the web today has taken on new capabilities. It continues to distribute information. It continues to collect and manipulate information. Now it is responding to users. It is interactive, acting more like a desktop application than a traditional website. We also have commercial interests. Electronic commerce, here again, involving user interactions. Banking, airlines, retail. Social interest, interacting with our friends, sharing, posting reviews, bidding on auctions. The web is still an information medium. It still is primarily content. We still use links, but also it is more task-centered. And this is where the user comes in. Based on those tasks need to be centered on the users and other needs. How these tasks respond to the user's actions. We still have some similar concerns for the user. Does this website give me value? Is it easy to use? Is it pleasant to use? Same concerns for the business. Are goals and objectives accomplished? Will the visitor return? Will they complete the action? Is it successful? Something else we'll be looking at in this class. How do we determine if your goals have been accomplished, if you have been successful? Many times we develop things that are not user-centered. A website might be developed or a product might be developed on what the business wants, what the designer wants, what the designer thought was a good idea, what we thought the client wanted. We never really asked them, or we never really tested. We just assumed that we knew. User-centered, on the other hand, is based on the user. And because websites have become so complex and feature-rich, to be effective, they have to have good user experiences. Just having technology for the sake of technology does nothing. Today we have additional considerations: mobile devices, different browsers, different versions of browsers, different operating systems, different types of internet connections. We need to take in mind accessibility, special requirements, screen readers, slow connections, older browsers, older computers. We also need to look at the nature of the site or product, the budget of the company, the time frame, and remembering that one size does not fit all in the methodology that we use. Here again, measuring effectiveness. Sometimes you can't use quantitative measures, possibly analyzing revenue, number of page views, and user surveys. In our text, Elements of the User Experience, the author uses a 5-step approach, or 5 planes, in order to develop the application. The strategy plane, which is the most important, focuses on what are we doing and why. What are the goals? What are the objectives? What are the needs? Questions that we should answer up front and foremost before we even start planning or writing code. So at the strategy plane, this is where we start thinking about the user right from the beginning, identifying user characteristics, identifying the needs within the context of the goals for our site. Yes, we still have goals and objectives that come from the company. We also have goals and objectives that might come from the user. We need to know what the user wants from us and how can we fit that in with our goals. The next plane, number 2, the scope. This is where we start identifying what are the functional specifications that we might need. What are some of the tasks involved or applications? The content requirements. What will the content be? What type of media will it be? The third plane, or the structure plane. This is where we start looking at the information architecture and the interaction design. This is where we start organizing the content by means of a sitemap. And this is not the same type of sitemap that you see on a website. The fourth plane, the skeleton plane. This is where we start thinking about how the interface will be structured, how the navigation will fit in. This is where we create a wireframe of the different parts of our application. Finally, the surface plane, number 5. This is where we actually start the visual design, and we might start with a prototype before we get to the finished product. You've heard the term content is king, and it still is. Content is the single most important thing to offer to users, is content that they will find valuable. So never underestimate the value of good content. Now technology, because we live in such a technological world, can be just as important as content in creating a successful user experience. The nature of the experience that we provide can be largely determined by technology, so it is important that we use the right technology in the right places. Needless to say, good experience is good for business. It creates satisfied employees. It can create a return on investment, which is revenue, customer loyalty, Another term in the book, conversion rate, refers to going to the next level, measuring a goal. For example, signing up for a newsletter, and what percent of visitors did that. The first step in developing user-centered content is don't make the user think. The user shouldn't have to say, where do I start? Where can I go? Where is something? Is it clickable? What does something mean? What else do I have to do? The user shouldn't have to think. It should be obvious. We should minimize the time about thinking as much as possible. It should be obvious at a glance, or it should be self-explanatory. The next video, we will look at how we use the web.